Hello, sir. Good morning.
Hello, Ankit. Good morning.
Sir, you've said it a number of times that our democracy has been reduced to merely vote and shout. All your life, you've talked about electoral reforms and political reforms. What are the flaws that you see in the way we conduct our elections?
It's not the way we conduct our elections.
Okay.
The conduct of elections is pretty ideal.
Okay.
For a country of our poverty and our limitations in a variety of ways, we are remarkable. What the Election Commission does on the whole, there is a peaceful conduct of poll, orderly conduct of poll. People vote voluntarily, there's no coercion. Yes, there may be vote buying, but that is voluntary. Nobody's forced them to take money and vote for the fellow who is given money. That's a different issue. We'll come to that later. And notwithstanding some silly talk of EVMs or something, election machines are as perfect as they could be. And there are all safeguards available to see that there's no rigging or manipulation of the poll. And I want to emphasize this. There are absolute safeguards, whether it is in setting a machine there, properly randomizing, or a mock poll, whether it's the old ballot paper system or now there is a mock poll conducted in the presence of the parties, agents, etc. And then there's a proper seal, and then the storage of the ballots properly, in this case EVM storage, again in a transparent manner, completely with the watch and word of the political parties and their agents, if they so wish. And then there is an honest counting. There is a declaration of result on the basis of the counting. There are again safeguards in counting of VVPAT, etc. And then finally results are declared and people accept the verdict and there's peaceful transfer of power. So conduct of elections is as perfect as it could be. I'm sure there are going to be some improvements with technology and so on and so forth. I certainly would like to see increasing use of electronic voting for those people who are not able to participate in voting, overseas Indians, other people, etc. But we'll see later.
Sir, one question. Ballot paper versus EVMs. What do you think we need right now?
EVMs. We've held elections with EVMs for the past 40 years. The first election was in 1983 in Shadnagar, in then Andhra Pradesh. EVM election, the whole assembly constituency. Then slowly, progressively, they were expanded, very cautiously, very carefully. All kinds of safeguards are provided. People are completely familiar with that. And time and again, they have been verified. They have been examined very critically. And the courts examined the legal implications. And so far, there is not one verifiable instance of fraud on account of EVM in the country. And there are safeguards available to make sure that the VVPATs actually coincide with that. If you know when you press a button, those of us who voted, sometimes you may not observe. When you press a button, I always see whether
the slip.
The slip is actually rolling out with the imprint of the party symbol, etc. Whether I voted for that or not, if it didn't come, I have a right to complain immediately.
Absolutely.
And there is a random counting of the VVPATs. If the party is so wish, they can actually pay extra money and get full counting of VVPATs also. And there is, as I said repeatedly, there is no verifiable single complaint which has any material evidence to support it that the EVMs are not working. In the olden days also with ballot papers, we did a pretty credible job, but that was much more cumbersome. The printing of ballot papers, the secrecy of ballot papers, somebody can steal a few ballot papers, occasionally ballot papers are found here and there. And then rigging was much more easy at that time.
Okay.
Because what was happening was, suddenly somebody would come and then they would coerce or they would pay a bribe or something, and then tapa in half an hour, chapa maro, 500 votes or 300 votes, and then you dump them in the ballot box. Unless somebody actually complains with evidence, there is no recourse. So destruction of ballot boxes or this kind of rigging was pretty common. In those days, repoll was pretty normal. Whereas now, there's always a gap. Once I press the button, the vote is recorded. You can't simply put another chapa or come and press button. You can't simply go on pressing the button. So there is an inherent gap systemically. And for a variety of reasons, that kind of rigging has disappeared now.
So if the opposition has the experience of booth capturing and ballot tampering of the past, Then why does it ask for a ballot paper now instead of an EVM?
No, see, sour grapes. Whenever I lose something, I think it's because of the fraud in the thing. No, I don't do well in examinations. I say examination paper is bad, or I say the evaluator, the examiner is bad. He's done injustice to me.
Right.
This is a normal thing. We all tend to believe that. And parties put enormous emotion, enormous time, resources, and hope in the election. It's almost become a lottery in India.
Right.
And political power, unlike many other democratic societies, is the be-all and end-all in our country. Oftentimes, it seems to be without any purpose. Power sans purpose, recognition. Each individual feels, my God, if I don't have power, am I nobody? A very strange thinking, very strange spectacle. In the backdrop, sometimes, most often, we must be fair to our political parties and leaders. The losing party and the leaders, they graciously accept that they lost in the ballot box. And for the ideals they stand for, they'll continue to fight for them. But they respect the people's verdict and they'll be constructive opposition. That is the norm. It has been the case in India. But of late, it is sad. Earlier, some of the regional party chieftains and some of the local chieftains of one or two national parties did that. For instance, I remember 3 instances. Miss Jayalalitha, when she lost the election, she blamed the EVMs. Same Miss Jayalalitha, she went to Supreme Court rejected her claim. Next election, she won with a thumping margin with EVMs. Mr. Chandrababu Naidu, when he lost the election in 2004, he blamed the EVMs. 10 years later, with a thumping margin, he won the election.
Right.
Then Mr. Captain Amarinder Singh of Congress Party, at the time in Punjab, when his party and he lost the election, he personally did not lose perhaps, but his party lost the election, he was the leader of the party in the state. He again blamed the EVMs, again went to Supreme Court, court rejected it. Again he won with a thumping majority in the next election. But this is the first time that a major national party, officially and repeatedly, is making the claim that whenever we lose it's because of EVMs. It's a bogus claim. It's a dangerous claim for the democracy because faith in the democratic process, at least the polling process, is critical for democracy to survive. If I believe that my vote does not count, no matter what I feel, the verdict is predetermined, then there's no democracy left. Once people lose that faith, the country will be in extreme danger. So I think people must be very, very careful when they make comments like that. Yes, no system is perfect. Yes, no country is perfect. Our country is far from perfect. I have been one of the most vocal critics of what is wrong with our country. But this is barking at the wrong horse.
So conduct of elections, we don't have a real challenge. So where is the real challenge in elections?
The political process.
Right.
There are 3 big challenges. Challenge 1. What is the contest in an election between candidates? Notionally, anybody, you, I, anybody can go and contest. But really, are we contenders? So contest is between whom? Between serious, recognized parties that people believe are likely to win in our electoral system.
Okay.
Right? Now, how are these candidates of these major parties chosen? Do people or the members of the party have any role? Have they come always through the strength of activity and public service and the public acclamation? No. They're chosen randomly by the party bosses for considerations other than their competence or integrity or commitment to public good. These are the 3 things you require, right? Competence, integrity, and commitment to public good. So the first thing is, there is no internal democracy in political parties. And therefore, the election itself is a false choice in many cases. You don't know who these candidates are very often. And because you have to vote for one of the major parties and there's no other way in the electoral system, we'll come to that later, electoral system thing later, and you have to choose one of them. There's no other serious option, though legally, on paper, options exist, but in reality, options do not exist. So unless there's internal democracy within the political parties, you cannot sustain democracy in the country. Our parties have become totally monolithic, dominated by an individual and or a family. They become autocracies. They become private fiefdoms. They became personal jagirs. You cannot allow that. The second big challenge of the political process is the electoral system. In good faith, we embraced the British electoral system, the first past the post system, as we call it. In fact, what most people do not realize is there are very few countries in the world with the first past the post electoral system. Because we are English speaking and because we are a British colony, because we only think all the times of America and Britain, we think this is normal. No. Most countries in the world have other systems. Only British former colonies had this system. Many former colonies gave up this system. Australia has a different system, alternative voting. New Zealand has proportional representation. US, of course, has first past the post, but with a separation of powers. Only Canada and Britain too, only in the House of Commons election. Even in Britain, in the regional parliaments of Scotland, Wales, Northern Ireland, etc., you don't have the first past the post system. In Britain, when they were part of European Union, European elections were not by first past the post system. London Mayor is by direct election. So what Britain is giving up, except in House of Commons, we are embracing tightly. As a result, what happened in a first past the post system, there are only two serious contenders. A vote for anybody else is perceived to be a wasteful vote.
Right.
It's wasted. Now, when parties don't have internal democracy, they choose candidates because of their own requirements, not the public good. When people have very few choices, and where there is intense struggle for power in India, it's a life or death struggle, unlike in Britain or America. It's not a life or death struggle. They may fight for an ideal, but if you are out of power, you're not dead in your mind. You have absolute no. Because politics does not dictate your life in every sense of the term. In India, it does. So what happened is extreme competition for votes between two major players in most cases, leading to money distribution. Because Indian people are poor, remember. We are almost unlike a democracy. There is no other country which dare to embrace universal franchise with our level of poverty and our level of low literacy and inadequate experience in dealing with any kind of democratic franchise for a long time. Chola's time we had, Anle we had, but in the last 1,000 years, we hardly had any democratic experience. So given that backdrop, distribution of money has now become endemic in many parts of the country.
Right.
While the legal ceiling is 28 lakhs or 30 lakhs or 40 lakhs per assembly constituency, the actual expenditure in many states is about 100 times that money. 100 times, not twice, not thrice. Andhra Pradesh, Telangana, Karnataka, Tamil Nadu being the worst culprits. But increasingly in parts of Western India, Jammu and Kashmir, Northeast and several other states, it's now spreading. Always bad practices spread faster than good practices, unfortunately. The second thing is, because again for the same reason, you have to somehow persuade the people to vote for you. And one vote more means you win, one vote less means you lose. There's a desperation to go in for excessive individual short-term benefits.
Right.
What we call welfare. What is welfare? Individual short-term benefits. At the cost of the basic role of the state and the collective long-term good. A government is created and government is elected to promote collective long-term good. Let there be no mistake about it. That's why we pay taxes. Now, individual short-term benefits are necessary, but the balance is completely broken in many parts of the country because of desperation to get elected. You see it in all states. Now, this party, that party, there's no distinction. Maharashtra recently, everybody offered all kinds of individual short-term benefits. Karnataka, the 5 guarantees. Telangana, 6 guarantees. Andhra Pradesh, a bankrupt exchequer, and yet they offered guarantees which they cannot afford. No, state after state, sometimes at the union level, we are now becoming utterly imbalanced at the cost of the future. Particularly because service delivery is very poor. Ultimately, democracy is about delivering with the tax money what the government should be delivering. If they fail to deliver, then people anyway don't have any expectation of a government. Therefore, the money and the short-term freebies. The third is, again, largely because of the electoral system and the political culture. We are a very diverse society, caste, region, religion, language, region, and all kinds of diversities exist. It's easy to provoke these primordial loyalties for electoral purposes. because that's the only way of political mobilization for many parties, because it's not about understanding self-interest. It's not about understanding what my vote means. So the second basket, the first I told you internal democracy in parties. Right. The second is electoral malpractices, which are now eroding and corroding our democracy itself. If there is monumental corruption in India, if there is complete misallocation of resources, if there is endemic abuse of power in the country, people in power behave like oriental despots, monarchs, it is because the electoral system, combined with the circumstances of India. The same electoral system does not lead to the same results everywhere.
Okay.
You must understand the context in which we are operating, right, and the time in which we are operating. Even in Britain, 100 years ago, 150 years ago, 160 years ago, things were pretty bad. But they overcame that. So the second basket is the electoral malpractices completely distorting the electoral verdict and democracy itself.
Right.
The third is, how does a citizen understand the link between you and the state, the government, at the local level? You are expecting a few pundits, newspaper editors, and others to look at fiscal policy of the country, monetary policy of the central bank, some of the industrial policy. These are all things only for a few people. Most people understand government in terms of what am I getting for the tax money I'm paying?
Right.
Are my roads okay? Am I getting water supply regularly, even if I have to pay for that? But am I getting it at all? Is my kid going to a decent school without having to pay anything extra because I already paid taxes? Is the kid going to fulfill her potential? When I am sick, can I go to a hospital without my family being bankrupt? Then when I drive, can I be reasonably sure that the other fellow will not jump a red light and then hit me? So no, the simple things government should be doing. All these things are local. These are not some grand national issues. That's why in genuine democracies everywhere in the world, most functions that matter to people are dealt with locally. Whereas in India, we created an extremely centralized government where local governments are completely innervated. They're irrelevant. We wrote a 7,700 word constitutional chapter, 73rd, 74th amendments, but we created overstructured, underpowered local governments. And therefore, if anything, they destroyed the little good that local governments were capable of doing earlier. Except the state of Kerala, where there is a political consensus and they are steadfastly adhering to this, local governments are completely weak and innervated across the country. And without local government, there is no link in the people's mind between the vote I give and the benefit or the service I get, the consequences that visit on my family, between the taxes I pay and the services I receive, and between the authority the person exercises and the accountability. And as a result, we have none of these links. Authorities without accountability. Vote doesn't mean anything except the freebies and the money that I get on that day. And taxes I pay, ask any taxpayer, do they feel good about paying taxes in the country? Increasingly, many young people in the gig economy, in the electronics or in the IT sector, many other sectors, people are paying taxes. There are not many who are paying direct personal taxes, but others are paying indirect taxes. The poorest of the poor are paying from their very small incomes, hard-earned income, they are paying taxes. Do people feel that we are actually getting worthwhile services for the taxes we pay? Do the people feel that I am happy that I paid taxes? So these three baskets, political parties, internal democracy, electoral system to change the terrible practices that undermining democracy. Somebody is winning all right, but is that the meaning of winning? Spending 30, 40 crores for an assembly constituency and then thinking that it's your private estate? And then local governance.
So you talked about major democracies giving up the first past the post system. If that is the case, then why are we still holding on to this system?
No good reason. We're simply familiar with that.
Right.
In fact, if you take the constitution making itself, Baba Sahib Ambedkar and the members of the Constituent Assembly, they recognized other systems do exist, though they were not very familiar with that. There was a somewhat perfunctory discussion on the separation of powers model that America has. Executive, legislature, and judiciary are separate. Judiciary, of course, is separate and independent in India too, but executive and legislature is separate. Whereas in our system, they're both fused. Without legislative majority, you can't be an executive. Once you are the executive, you actually control the legislature because you have a majority until the legislature throws you out by no confidence motion. That's the British model. Dr. Ambedkar, in his famous statement, said, between responsibility and stability, we prefer responsible government. It's a very nice turn of phrase, but it's not entirely accurate in the sense that separation of powers actually makes you more accountable. The legislature jealously guards its turf, does not allow the executive to have its way as it pleases in budget making or in law making. And legislature can actually remove you, but by a higher bar because you're directly elected. So it's not true to say that separation of powers, government with separation of powers will be more stable and less responsible.
Okay.
It is easily it was dismissed. Whereas on paper, a parliamentary system that we have, Westminster model, is responsible because it's supposed to be responsible to the legislature. In reality, what happens in India, we all know. To what extent governments are responsible to legislature, to what extent legislatures are actually asserting themselves, are exercising their minds, we all know. So it was a perfunctory discussion in my view. And oftentimes when you see the legislatures, I'm not stating any state secret. Anybody who has some understanding of politics and governance in India, they know this. There's almost no serious application of mind as in the budget or lawmaking in India. The one thing legislators in India are not involved in most of the time is lawmaking. They're supposed to be legislators.
Yes.
It's not even a serious issue. Oftentimes a separate afternoon session or something is set apart. And then 9 or 10 bills are passed in about half an hour or 1 hour. Nobody pays attention. So we have a system where the only function of legislature is to raise hands in favor of the executive. And if you're an opposition party, to oppose the executive, irrespective of the merits of an issue, never have a meaningful debate, or at least most of the time don't have meaningful debate. But that was not foreseen at the time. They somehow believe because they were familiar with that. But we must also grant that the Constituent Assembly and Dr. Ambedkar realized there are other models available. And therefore, the Constitution actually provides for proportional representation. If you carefully look at the wording of the Constitution in terms of the composition of the state legislature, state assembly, and Lok Sabha, it never talked about the Lok Sabha seat as a single constituency. It talked about a constituency may be divided into number of seats, one or more seats in proportion to the population. What is the idea? That proportional representation is within the constitutional ambit. Except that because of the earlier practice and the law and the rules we adopted, it became the Westminster model, first past the post system. But the Constitution never talked about the first past the post system. Other models are available.
Do our current leaders know that other models are available?
I think most people are unaware of it. I myself came to know from Sri L.K. Advani. When I was discussing with him some 30 years ago, or 30 years ago, I think even before NDA came to power, he pointed out to me that the first 2 general elections had multi-member constituencies to accommodate reservations. There were no SC seats at the time.
Okay.
There were no ST seats at the time. We don't know. We all think that what we know is the only thing in reality. No. They were actually, for SC, wherever they wanted a SC reservation, they made it a dual member constituency. You elect an SC and you elect an ST both. And in one case, I believe, there was actually a 3-member constituency. What happened in 1957 was, Mr. V.V. Giri was defeated in one such constituency. Because the law was drafted in a loose manner. Mr. V.V. Giri was in one of those Orissa, Andhra border areas with significant tribal population. But those tribals while they're tribals officially, but they're local rajas and pedigree. For instance, even now if you see Santosh Mohan Dev and many other people in that area, both this side and that side of Andhra Pradesh and Orissa, these are all very prominent families, very wealthy families, well-educated families. They are the tribal chiefs and kings. So what happened was the highest number of votes were garnered by a quote-unquote tribal candidate. The second highest number went to Mr. V.V. Giri. How was the law framed at that time? The law said the first seat will go to the candidate getting the highest number of votes.
Right.
The second seat will go to a tribal getting the highest number of votes.
Right.
Because the first seat went to a tribal candidate, because they are actually very prominent figures, political figures. Until now, they are still very prominent in that area. Kishore Chandra Dev, all those families, very well-known people. V.V. Giri lost. V.V. Giri was a major labor leader in the country.
He could not get the second seat also.
Exactly. Congress party panicked. Instead of simply redrafting it to say that the first seat will go to a tribal candidate, in which case, anyway, the highest number of votes would have gone to that candidate would have won. The second seat goes to the highest number of votes that you got after the candidate is over, first candidate is elected. It will solve the problem. In India, we never think about drafting, or drafting is oftentimes very poor. 73rd, 74th Amendments of the Constitution is a good example. There are many other laws I can cite you how we do a report drafting. And therefore, instead, we went for reservation of constituencies, a quota system whereby reservation of constituency on a semi-permanent or permanent basis. Some constituencies were reserved for 25, 30, 40 years on the basis of the slightly higher proportion of this or that population. So the point I'm making is, under the existing constitution, for 2 general elections, we had multi-member constituencies. A man like former President Pranab Mukherjee, when he was president, when I pointed out to him, he was very surprised. Pranab was encyclopedic in his knowledge of politics post-independence. Probably there was not a facet of Indian politics he was not aware of. He was extremely well informed, but even he was surprised. Then actually I got a copy of the Constitution, brought it to Rashtrapati Bhavan and showed him. He was thrilled. So our Constituent Assembly actually made a provision for that. I think most leaders are not even aware of it.
Right.
And I was not aware until Shri L.K. Advani pointed out to me.
Right. So coming to what is being discussed right now, I here have with me 3 articles that you've written. First is 11th September 2023. This is on the reality of holding simultaneous elections. You say that you start off by saying that the government is contemplating simultaneous elections for Lok Sabha and state legislative assemblies. You end by saying that the Kovind committee should look at the deeper crisis of our democracy. The second is, you wrote it on 23rd September 2024. You started off saying that reform for reform's sake does not make our democracy better. It might only complicate our challenges further. You ended by saying that this is an opportunity to examine in depth, calmly and dispassionately the challenges confronting our democracy. And the latest one that you've written, that is 14 December 2024, you start off by citing Gresham's law, saying sometimes bad or poorly thought out ideas gain currency in preference to carefully considered evidence-based, logically sound ideas. So 1.5 years now, sir, and I think it looks like a reality that the One Nation, One Election bill is going to be presented in the Lok Sabha. How do you make of this, sir? Like, have you been discussing it in deeper the way that we discussed today, or are we just skirting the problem?
I think the challenge is a little deeper than a party or a leader. It's easy for us to say BJP or Sri Narendra Modi as Prime Minister. The middle classes, the media, and many politicians, they're vexed with elections in India. It's one of the paradoxes. Because elections are too costly, too cumbersome, too much consumption of energy and time. Too much of time is taken away in the political campaigns. There's too much of disruption. Even the preamble to the bill that's sought to be introduced in Lok Sabha probably today, or Parliament today, it says that model code of conduct and months and months are lost and it's not good and that kind of. So basically, you're vexed with the democratic process.
Right.
It's very unique to a democracy. Second, we somehow think that there are very easy, quick fixes to a deeper democratic challenges. We discussed three in some detail.
Yes.
Today we can go into greater detail to understand that these are the central issues plaguing our democracy. Now, the assumption that somehow there is a technical fix, if only you hold elections together, it's all over. Or if only you do something else, it's all over. No. The third is that a political crisis can be addressed by less politics. No. By choosing a democracy and universal franchise, we've chosen politics.
Right.
Now, there are serious political challenges. I have probably been the most vocal in the country, identifying and talking about them and doing a little bit wherever possible in relation to them for the past 30 years or so. But the only answer to the crisis in a democracy or the failings of a democracy or the challenges of democracy is more and better politics, not less politics. Because look at the United States. They have a 2-year campaign for the presidency. They never complained that, my God, there is 2 years of election campaign going on, the country is going to dogs. Because politics is the way you shape public opinion. You distill ideas. And you give expression to people's views and people's feelings and people's experiences. Politics is not about me going and voting that day because I've taken the money or you offered me a freebie, the short-term maximization. Politics is about me as a citizen exercising my sovereignty. We the people are the sovereigns. And if our democracy is flawed, and it is very flawed, there's no doubt about it, then should we make people wiser? Should we make people more thoughtful? Understand more about what is happening, why it is happening, and how we can set it right? Or should we say, somehow or other, you vote that day for this and that, let's see what will happen. 5 years we'll figure out. The democratic crisis only deepens. So there's no mala fide here. I don't think there's any deep conspiracy to do something dramatic. No, we read too much into that. People are vexed, they want to do something, and there is no depth. And unless you go by evidence-based approach, and unless you actually logically understand first the crisis of a country. Is the crisis because there are too many elections conducted? Or is the crisis because we are not able to elect in our system men and women who require to be elected or who are fit to be elected by 3 qualities: integrity, competence, commitment to public good. I think nobody disputes that. Now, have we created a system where these 3 are put on a pedestal? Have we created a system where men and women have that kind of chosen as candidates and are likely to win? No, not at all. Let's not hoodwink ourselves. The first question that I asked of any intending candidate in any major political party in many states, I'm not saying universally across the country, but they're spreading across the country, is how much money can you spend?
Right.
If in some of these states you say, I can't spend money, I'll raise the 40, 50 lakhs required to be spent by a candidate under the law, that much I'll raise, but I cannot spend more, chances are that that person will not be a candidate, period. In most cases, in most parties. Is that right? Instead of going to the roots of the problem, we are trying to gloss over that. We're trying to find a mechanical solution. We're trying to find a technical fix. That is what is the problem here. There's no mala fide. It's just an unwillingness to go into the detail and the accepting status quo as normal.
Right.
You're going with the flow. This is the way election is. I don't think political parties, I'm making a serious accusation with great respect and with great humility. Political parties are so completely exhausted. The amount of energy they have to expend in running politics, in finding candidates, conducting campaigns, in running day-to-day things, and in addressing the desires and the aspirations of many party workers. I want to be, big guy wants to be governor, small guy wants to be something else, but something or other. All the time you have to accommodate their needs. When you're in a position, you have to mount challenges, you have to have agitations, you have to come onto the street, organize a Rasta Roko, people go to jails. Now, only in India, politics means all this. Rest of the world, most of the time, politics is not Rasta Roko. Politics is not Shormachana. Politics is not going to the jail. Only in India we have that. There's so much of energy expended. And after all this, because we fail to actually deliver governance, all the elections, ultimately, what is the result? Except the fellow who is sitting there is changing, is change of place. There's no change in the rules of the game. So you have to somehow satisfy the people. Either freebies here from the government, short-term individual benefits at the cost of the long-term good, and not even or, and somehow your large group of karyakartas, they try to address day-to-day needs of the people. That's not what a political party should do. That's not the function of a political party. That's the function of a local government. You allow the government to fail and you create a vast army of political workers, and then they try and reach out to people. Every village, you go there, make a petition, do this, take them to this office, that office. Nowhere in a serious democracy does it happen. So we are glossing over the real crisis. Politics is reduced to somehow getting into power, and power without purpose.
Right.
And in that climate, hold on to some technical fix.
So you said there's no malafide behind this, but looks like the ruling party does not have the numbers required for such an amendment. But still they're introducing it.
So it's not malafide. Probably they have some political calculation. I don't know what it is. I'm surprised. Because I am not 99% certain, 99.999% certain, because we are not gods, we can't be 100% certain, that there is no way you can get a majority of 2/3 of the members of the parliament in both houses on this issue. I have no doubt. If that happens, it will be an amazing thing. I don't understand how it can happen. So I think government knows that. If you and I know that they don't have numbers in parliament, in both houses, the government certainly knows that. So they probably have some political calculation, maybe appease the middle classes in the country who are vexed with elections, who believe that's a very good idea. And therefore, see, we're trying to do something good and they're trying to stop us. So some such calculation. I don't think that calculation will work. I don't think it's well thought out.
So the major reason cited for this, for such a proposal, is the frequent and the costly elections. Now the cost can be on two accounts. One, cost to the state, the entire state machinery, and cost to the political parties. Are these two things being addressed in the simultaneous elections?
The first one, let us take the government expenditure. If I'm not mistaken, the latest election probably cost about 8,000 to 9,000 crores for the Lok Sabha.
Right.
It keeps increasing. I conducted an assembly election first at 1.5 lakh rupees. The first election I conducted. I conducted a parliamentary election as a returning officer. Probably it cost about 10 or 12 lakh rupees. The whole parliamentary constituency. As a district election officer, I conducted parliament elections in my three parliamentary constituencies. It probably cost me about, the exchequer, a little more, maybe all three put together about 30-40 lakhs. Now, parliamentary constituency, we are going to 15-20 crores. Even bureaucracy is now becoming profligate, but it's okay. About 8,000 to 9,000 crores. If assembly election also is held separately, because you have to have in a cycle of 5 years assembly elections. So in a cycle of 5 years, you can reasonably estimate another 8,000 to 9,000 crores.
Okay, 5
Total
years.
18,000 crores, let us say.
Right.
Okay, in some states actually there are simultaneous elections. Let's ignore, just round it off. If you hold simultaneously, it will be more than 9,000 crores because you are going to have two
Right.
ballot boxes and so on and so forth, EVMs and so on and so forth. And therefore, probably it will cost 12,000 crores. That's a ballpark number.
Okay.
Instead of 18,000 crores. So probably you'll save about 5,000 to 6,000 crores.
Okay.
In a period of 5 years.
5 years.
First understand that. In a period of 5 years. That means per year you save about 1,000 crores or so. Certainly, I am a very thrifty person. All my life, personally and in terms of public life, spending money frugally, getting the most value for the money you spend is a very vital necessity. So 5,000 crores saved, I am not going to dismiss it lightly, but put it in perspective.
Okay.
Do you know how much money is spent by the governments every single day in this country?
Yes.
20,000 crores. 20,000 crores a day. In 5 years, we're going to spend more than 4 crores, 400 trillion rupees. Now, in an expenditure of 4 crores, you're saying, I'm going to save 5,000 crores. It's such a fantastic thing. Is it really an issue where the nation's attention should be focused on constitution should be amended and then you must have this?
Right.
Unless there are compelling reasons why it is actually good for democracy. So that's, in my judgment, a very inadequate reason. Let me not use any harsher words than that. But look at the election expenditure by the parties and the candidates. The real issue is the candidates' expenditure for distribution of money. The party's expenditure is actually for the campaign. In any rational system, that should not be excessive. It may be another 10,000 crores or so in a period of 5 years. That's not a big amount. Genuinely getting your message across. The real expenditure in India, in most of the states, is the money distribution or inducements given to voters that you get them vote for you. And that money is very substantial. As I mentioned earlier, if 40 or 45 lakhs is the ceiling of expenditure in many states for an assembly constituency, there are many states where 15, 20, 30, 40 crores is spent, and there are cases where 100 crores is spent. There are by-elections where 150, 200 crores is spent. In one case, 400 crores, 350 to 400 crores in one assembly by-election was spent by the major party candidates. It's extraordinary. None of it will be altered.
None of it.
None of it will be altered, except that there is a hope probably that if the elections are held together, you don't have to pay it today and then tomorrow for that election also. But what does the model say? See, what is the basic proposal in this? That elections for the Lok Sabha and state assemblies will be held every 5 years simultaneously.
Right.
In between, even if an election is necessary, and in our system you cannot guarantee it will not be necessary. A government may fall, there may be no stability, there is no majority, constitution may fail, therefore a midterm poll is required. Then it will be elected only for the remainder of the term. That means this and this are fixed.
Right.
No matter how many elections we have, again election will be held at the end of the 5 years. Now, look at the situation. In 1996, election was held for the Lok Sabha. The then ruling party and combined lost the election. And first Vajpayee government came to office for 13 days. Then the other parties with Congress support formed a coalition. But that could not last long because Congress withdrew support in 1998. A general election was held.
Right.
All right, it was necessary. Vajpayee government came to power after 1998. Another election was held because the government lost a no confidence motion by 1 vote.
Right.
1999. From 1999, at least 2004, we had a stability in the country.
Right.
And we had no elections for the Lok Sabha. In this model, even after that, the 1999 government could have only last until 2001.
Right. Yes.
Because 96 to 2001 is the term. It's a fixed term. It's a normal term or natural term, whatever expression they used. No matter how many elections held in between, again 2001 there should be an election.
Right.
So you're actually building more instability in the system, not stability. And by truncating terms like that, for the assembly in some cases or Lok Sabha in some cases, actually things are going to get worse. What is happening now? You are not looking at the long-term public good. The government's primary goal is marshal all resources and public attention to promote the long-term public good, the core functions of government. But because you have the compulsion of winning the election, on the one hand, the candidates are spending a lot of money to buy the vote, to induce the voters. Wrong, distorting politics and democracy. On the other hand, the parties are offering, once I come to power, I will take care of individual short-term needs at the cost of the long-term good. Therefore, elections are actually causing that problem. There's no doubt about it. Now, by truncating the term of an assembly or Lok Sabha, depending on the situation, without giving a 5-year tenure, you're guaranteeing that that is much more endemic.
Right.
So you cannot give any kind of stability actually. Unless a government has a stable tenure of 5 years without an election in between, unless it's warranted. If our system says midterm polls are necessary if there's instability or whatever, there's nothing we can do. But otherwise, we must have a system where there is greater stability, not less stability. And because of instability in Delhi, you create a problem in the state, or because of or because a midterm poll, again you cause another midterm poll, and then finally you have to have anyway regular poll. There's no guarantee of 5-year tenure. It's actually going to do much worse. And India has become more and more stable. If you notice states and union, by and large governments are now staying for 5 years.
Right.
Unlike in the earlier era, there was a time of Ayaram, Gayaram in the country. There was instability in many states. UP saw a lot of instability in those days. Haryana, of course, is notorious for instability. Several other states. Governments used to fall like ninepins. Now it's not happening. Now what you are doing is, any instability at the national level or state level guarantees truncated tenure of the governments and therefore greater propensity to go for short-term freebies. It's not a good thing for the country.
So what is the significance of a 5-year term?
Because that is the term that we constitutionally prescribe to our governments. It's a reasonable thing. I have no opposition to that.
Okay.
You can say 5 years, you can say 6 years.
Okay.
But we are used to 5 years, and 5 years is a long enough period. Now, as a general principle, we must understand that there is always a clash in the minds of politicians between the short-term compromise you have to make to ensure survival of the government. And the short-term compromise, among other things, are somehow appease the voter. Because you're not able to deliver what the voter actually needs, you're trying to attract the voters with short-term individual welfare measures.
Right.
At the cost of long-term good. But unless you also promote long-term good, look at the long-term infrastructure, quality of education, healthcare, economic growth, investment, etc., and rule of law, etc., the country will be in great danger. Now, by forcing an election because of this method, you're actually making it less likely in some situations. So instead of doing good, you may be doing some bad.
Right.
Not only are you not solving the fundamental problems of our democracy, but you're actually adding to another problem. You're adding another dimension to the problem, which is not at all wise in any sense. And people don't understand the link in what they're voting for. In most cases, you vote for or against the state government. Most people vote according to their appreciation of the state, either rewarding the state or punishing the state government. Now, in a democracy, to make it mature, what do we require? Greater understanding of which tier does what work.
What works?
What does Lok Sabha do? What does Assembly do? And what does local government do? It's not America where you vote differently for different posts. Some 25, 30 people are elected, and people look at the individual, the qualities, the background, and then vote accordingly. In India, the truth is, in most cases, we vote for the same symbol. Most people. 80%, 90%. Only 10, 15% people discern. We must increase this discernment. We must increase this understanding of who does what and reward and punish depending on their performance at that level. Blindly, if you vote for a party across the board, it actually does more harm than good. So a combined election at our stage of democracy will probably make it much more difficult to improve the system because there's no accountability. People don't know what they're voting for.
Right. Thank you, sir, for sharing your perspectives today.